Hello, my friend. Welcome back. Or, if this is your very first time here, a very warm welcome to you as well. I'm really glad you are here today. Make yourself comfortable. Maybe you are listening with a cup of tea. Maybe you are on the bus, walking home, or simply relaxing after a long day. Today, we have a story that feels quiet at first. But little by little, it becomes something quite surprising. And, in some ways, very emotional too. Imagine this for a moment. A woman lives alone in a small London flat. Days pass. Then weeks. Then years. People see her sometimes. She nods politely. She keeps to herself. Nothing seems unusual. But one day, after nearly 20 years, her neighbours discover something they never expected. And suddenly, everything they believed about her changes. Can you imagine that? Living beside someone for years, and not really knowing them at all? That is the story we are exploring today. The woman who lived alone in a London flat for 20 years, and what her neighbours finally discovered. And as always, while we enjoy this story together, you will also learn useful English vocabulary in a slow, natural way. Today, we will learn words like neighbourhood, caretaker, quietly, curious, corridor, landlord, routine, and unexpected. Do not worry if some of these words feel new right now. I will explain them simply while we listen to the story together. Before we begin, here is a small British cultural fact for you. In many parts of Britain, especially in cities like London, people often live very close to one another in buildings called blocks of flats. A flat means the same thing as an apartment. But something interesting happens. Even when neighbours live only a few meters apart, many British people prefer privacy. Sometimes neighbours smile politely and say hello, but do not ask many personal questions. People often say, "Mind your own business." That means, be respectful and do not interfere too much in someone else's private life. Useful sometimes. But as you will hear today, perhaps not always. So, settle in. Take a slow breath. And let us begin our story. In the north of London, on a quiet street lined with old brick buildings, there stood a tired-looking block of flats called Hawthorne House. It was not beautiful. The paint was peeling. The lift broke down often. The carpet in the hallway had seen better days. But people stayed there because London was expensive, and rent was difficult to afford. Rent means the money people pay to live in a house or flat that belongs to someone else. For example, many people rent a flat before buying a home. In flat 14, on the third floor, lived a woman named Margaret Finch. Most people simply called her the quiet lady. She had lived there longer than almost anyone else. 20 years. Maybe more. No one knew exactly. And strangely, very few people knew much about her at all. Margaret was always polite. Always. If she passed someone in the corridor, she would smile gently. "Morning," she would say. Or perhaps, "Lovely weather today." Then she would continue walking. Slowly. Quietly. Always alone. Corridor means a long passage inside a building with doors along the sides. For example, at school, students walk through corridors between classrooms. She never invited anyone inside her flat. Not once. No birthday visitors. No family coming and going. No loud music. No parties. No arguments. Nothing. Her curtains stayed closed most of the time. And yet, somehow, nobody thought much about it. Because in London, people were busy. Very busy. There was Mrs. Patel downstairs in flat 2. She knew everybody's business. At least, she tried to. She had lived there for 15 years and spent half her life looking through the window near the front entrance. Not in a rude way. Well, perhaps sometimes in a slightly rude way. But mostly because she enjoyed watching people. One rainy Tuesday morning, Mrs. Patel saw Margaret carrying several heavy shopping bags. "Margaret," she called. "Need some help there?" Margaret smiled. "Oh no, thank you, dear. I'm perfectly all right." And then she disappeared upstairs. As usual. Perfectly all right. Now, all right means okay or fine. For example, if someone asks, "Are you all right?" they mean, "Are you okay?" British people say this very often. Sometimes many times in one day. Mrs. Patel watched her go. "She's odd," she whispered to herself. "But harmless." Odd now. Odd means unusual or a little strange. For example, if someone wears winter clothes in hot weather, people may think that feels odd. Across the hall lived Daniel. He was 32 and worked long hours in an office. He hardly noticed anyone in the building. Life felt rushed. Wake up. Tube to work. Coffee. Emails. Come home tired. Sleep. Repeat. But even Daniel noticed Margaret. Mostly because she always seemed exactly the same. Same coat. Same careful way of walking. Same shopping trolley every Friday. Same gentle smile. Like time never touched her. Routine now. Routine means something you do regularly in the same way. For example, brushing your teeth every morning is part of a routine. Margaret's routine never changed. Every morning at precisely 7:30, she left the building. Every afternoon at exactly 3:15, she returned. Always carrying a small brown handbag. Always alone. Never late. Never early. Where does she go? Daniel once asked Mrs. Patel. Mrs. Patel leaned closer. No idea. Work. She must be retired. Family? Never seen any. Daniel shrugged. Strange. Curious now. Curious means interested and wanting to know something. For example, children are often curious and ask many questions. Slowly, people became curious about Margaret. Not because she caused trouble. Actually, because she caused none at all. She was invisible in the way quiet people sometimes become invisible. People noticed her, without really seeing her. Have you ever met someone like that? Someone always nearby, but somehow still a mystery? Winter came. The building felt colder than usual. The heating worked only when it wanted to. People complained. The landlord ignored them. Landlord now. Landlord means a person who owns property and rents it to other people. For example, if your shower breaks in a rented flat, you often call the landlord. One evening, the lights in the building stopped working. The corridor became dark. Residents grumbled. Some used phone torches. Others simply stayed inside. Around 9 o'clock, Daniel heard a soft knock at his door. He opened it. Margaret stood there holding a candle. "I thought this might help," she said gently. Daniel blinked. "Oh, thank you. You shouldn't walk in the dark," she said softly. Then she turned and walked away. He stood there for a moment. Surprised. That was kind. Unexpectedly kind. Unexpected now. Unexpected means something surprising that you did not think would happen. For example, receiving a gift for no reason can feel unexpected. The next morning, Daniel told Mrs. Patel. She gave me a candle. Mrs. Patel looked shocked. She spoke to you? Yes. She never talks. She talks. Daniel laughed. Just not much. Mrs. Patel folded her arms. Well, that woman is hiding something. Daniel laughed again. But secretly. He wondered too. Then came the first strange thing. Margaret stopped leaving the flat. One day passed. Then another. Then a week. No 7:30 routine. No careful footsteps. No shopping trolley. Nothing. Mrs. Patel noticed first. She hasn't gone out, she whispered. Daniel frowned. You sure? I notice things. You definitely notice things. But still. He checked. Her curtains remained closed. No sound. No movement. Nothing. Maybe she's ill, Daniel said. Or maybe, whispered Mrs. Patel dramatically, something terrible has happened. 3 more days passed. Residents began talking. The caretaker finally arrived. Caretaker now. Caretaker means someone who looks after a building. For example, a caretaker may fix small problems or keep shared spaces clean. His name was Peter. Tall. Grey beard. Always carrying tools. Always looking slightly annoyed. He knocked loudly on Margaret's door. No answer. Again. Nothing. Margaret, he called. Silence. Daniel shifted nervously. Mrs. Patel looked worried now. Not curious. Worried. She always answers, she said quietly. Peter frowned. Should we call someone? No one spoke. The corridor suddenly felt colder. Much colder. Then Daniel noticed something. At the bottom of Margaret's door. A letter. Then another. Then several more. Unopened. Piled neatly. Like no one had touched them for days. Or perhaps longer. Peter looked serious. This isn't right. He took out his phone. We may need permission to enter. Mrs. Patel covered her mouth. Oh dear. Daniel stared at the silent flat. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. And none of them were prepared for what they were about to discover. All right. Before we continue the story, let us pause for a little vocabulary break together. Things are becoming quite mysterious, aren't they? Poor Margaret. And poor neighbours too, standing outside that quiet flat, wondering what on earth is happening. But before we continue, let us go over some of the useful English words we have heard so far. No pressure here. Just slow, simple English. Ready? Let us begin. ###1. Neighbourhood. Earlier, we talked about the area around Hawthorne House. Neighbourhood means the local area where people live. For example, I like my neighbourhood because people are friendly. Simple, right? British people often use this word when talking about local shops, parks, or neighbours. Someone might say, it's a quiet neighbourhood. Or, this neighbourhood has changed a lot. And here is a small tip. In Britain, people often care deeply about their neighbourhood, even if they complain about it all the time. Very British behaviour, honestly. ###2. Corridor. We also learned corridor. A corridor is a long passage inside a building with rooms or doors on both sides. For example, the children ran through the school corridor. Or, I heard footsteps in the corridor. In Britain, especially in blocks of flats, people often say things like, I met my neighbour in the corridor. Very useful word. Next, we had routine. This is a very important English word. A routine means something you do regularly in the same order. For example, my morning routine is tea, breakfast, and reading messages. Or maybe your English learning is part of your routine. I hope so. British people use this word all the time. Someone may say, I don't like changing my routine. And honestly, many people feel exactly that way. Now this is a lovely word. Curious. It means wanting to know more. Interested. Asking questions. For example, I was curious about the new neighbour. Or, children are curious about everything. British people sometimes say, just curious. That means, I simply want to know. Though sometimes, people are being a little nosy, and nosy means asking too many personal questions. And finally, unexpected. This means surprising. Something you did not expect. For example, the ending of the film was unexpected. Or, I received an unexpected phone call. British people use this word often when something surprises them. Sometimes in good ways. Sometimes not. And in today's story, well, I think something very unexpected is waiting for us. So then, we have neighbours waiting outside a silent flat. Letters piling up. No sign of Margaret. And a feeling that something is terribly wrong. What happened behind that closed door? Let us go back to Hawthorne House and find out. Peter stood silently outside flat 14. The corridor felt strangely quiet. Even quieter than usual. No one joked anymore. No one smiled. Mrs. Patel held her cardigan tightly around her shoulders. Daniel folded his arms. Everyone waited. Finally, Peter sighed. I've spoken to the building manager, he said. They've given permission. He held up a small ring of keys. If she's inside and hurt. He stopped speaking. Nobody wanted to finish that sentence. Can you imagine that moment? Standing outside someone's home. Someone you have seen for years. Someone familiar. But not really known. Wondering if something terrible waits on the other side. Peter carefully placed the key into the lock. It turned slowly. The door opened just a little. Not because you dislike people. But because speaking feels difficult. Sometimes sadness changes people quietly, and others never notice. Mrs. Patel began crying softly. All these years. Daniel looked uncomfortable. Not uncomfortable in a rude way. Just sad. Confused. Guilty, perhaps. But then Peter turned another page. And what they read next surprised them even more. Margaret had not spent 20 years simply sitting alone. Not at all. Those boxes. They mattered. Every single one. Inside them were letters. Thousands of letters. Carefully organized. Every letter written to lonely people. Widowers. Widows. Teenagers struggling with sadness. Old pensioners with no family. People grieving. People frightened. People forgotten. Widow now. Widow means a woman whose husband has died. And widower means a man whose wife has died. For example, after her husband passed away, she became a widow. Margaret had secretly volunteered for a charity. For nearly 20 years. She wrote letters every day to strangers who felt alone. Sometimes 10 letters a day. Sometimes more. Encouraging them. Comforting them. Listening to their worries. Helping them feel less invisible. Invisible now. Invisible means not seen or unnoticed. For example, sometimes shy people feel invisible in big groups. Daniel stared at the boxes. She did all this. Peter nodded slowly. Looks like it. Mrs. Patel whispered. And we barely even knew her. But there was more. Much more. One box was labeled neighbours. Everyone froze. Slowly, Daniel opened it. Inside sat envelopes. Each with names. Residents of Hawthorne House. Even old neighbours who had moved away. Mrs. Patel blinked. There's one with my name. Daniel found his too. Hands shaking slightly, they opened them. Daniel read first. His throat tightened. Dear Daniel. You always look tired when you come home. I hope work becomes easier. Please remember, success matters less than happiness. Take breaks sometimes. And call your mother more often. Daniel laughed sadly. How did she know I never call Mum enough? Mrs. Patel opened hers. Dear Mrs. Patel. You notice everything. Sometimes people laugh at this quality. But caring enough to notice others is a kind thing. Please continue checking on people. Even when they pretend not to need it. Mrs. Patel burst into tears. Oh goodness. Kindness now. Kindness means being caring and gentle toward others. For example, a small act of kindness can change someone's day. Suddenly, people understood something. Margaret had noticed everyone. Quietly. Carefully. Without anyone realizing. She knew when people looked sad. When they seemed stressed. When someone walked slower than usual. When someone cried in the lift after a difficult day. She had been paying attention all along. And perhaps, she had cared more than anyone else in the building. At the very end of the notebook, Margaret wrote one final message. Please do not feel sorry for me. I had sadness, yes. But I also had purpose. Helping others quietly gave me peace. If I have one regret, it is only this. Perhaps I should have opened my door more often. Perhaps we all should. Nobody spoke for a long time. What could they say? For 20 years, they had called her the quiet lady. The strange woman upstairs. The mystery neighbor. But she had been something else entirely. Someone thoughtful. Someone generous. Someone quietly helping hundreds of people survive loneliness. The following week, Hawthorne House changed. Slowly. But truly. Neighbors started talking more. Tea invitations appeared. People checked on older residents. Daniel finally called his mother every Sunday. Mrs. Patel somehow became even more curious. But now in a warmer way. Less gossip. More care. And outside the building, near the entrance, residents placed a small bench. With a brass plaque. A plaque now. Plaque means a small sign, often metal, placed somewhere to remember a person or event. For example, visitors stopped to read the plaque in the park. The plaque read, in memory of Margaret Finch, who reminded us that quiet people often carry the biggest hearts. And strangely enough, the building no longer felt quite so lonely. Well, what a story that was. A quiet woman, a mysterious neighbor, and a truth nobody expected. Let us summarize the story in 3 simple sentences. Margaret lived alone in a London flat for many years, and her neighbors knew very little about her. After she disappeared, they discovered she had secretly spent years helping lonely people through letters. Her kindness changed the neighborhood and reminded everyone to care more for one another. And now, here are 2 questions for you to think about. First, have you ever misunderstood someone before later learning their real story? And second, do you think modern neighbors know each other well enough anymore? You can think about those questions, or answer them in the comments. I would genuinely love to hear your thoughts. And next time, we will explore another surprising true-style story about an ordinary person hiding an extraordinary secret. You will not want to miss it. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Take care of yourself. Be kind to people around you. And remember, sometimes the quietest person in the room has the biggest story to tell. Until next time, cheerio, and have a lovely day.